Hello, my dear fifth primary student. This is the video of chapter 2 in the Railway Children. Without any delay, let's start. What we're going to learn today, as usual, revision for the most important events of the previous chapter, some preview questions to remember what you've prepared, the main events that happened in the chapter, the most important quotations, the chapter in points along with a character sketch. Let's start with the revision. The first question says, what happened to the children's father? As you remember, the children's father was taken away by two government officers and he had a problem with the government. The children didn't know any details for why he was taken. The next question says, how was the children's life affected by the absence of their father? We'd learned that the children had moved to a new house. It was smaller and it was in the countryside. They had moved to a cottage which was totally different than their old house in London. They started becoming poor and they couldn't afford a cook and a maid anymore. Okay, so they had to help their mother around the house. The house was dirty and the children thought they saw rats and it didn't have any water. The last revision question says, how did their mother embrace them and provide the best care she could? Here we learned that mother uh, was able to sacrifice her rest whenever she could in order to provide whatever the children needed, like when she stayed up all night in order to prepare the new house for them, to make it comfortable for the children to live in. And after father was taken away, she would go out early in the morning and wouldn't come back unless it was or until late in the evening, and she would be so tired and so ill in order to just earn money for the children. Next, the preview questions, and as usual, make sure that you've read and listened to the chapter carefully before starting. What kind of trains do you think the children will see? What do you think the engines use to make steam, and who will the children meet at the railway? Not all the questions' answers are inside your chapter, but for some questions you're going to have to search for the answer, and I'm sure you did. You are excellent. So let's see the chapter. So chapter 2 is called Coal Mines. Okay, now at the beginning, we learned that the children were drawn to the railway. They were really interested in the railway. They went to watch trains every day. They thought that the trains going to London were going to the place where their father was. So they were attached to the railway because they thought father was in London where the trains are going, or where the trains were going. And one day, Peter suggested that the children go and explore the railway station. The children agreed and they all went to the railway stations. They moved along railway lines and they saw piles of coal. They asked the porter of the station to tell them what the white lines that marked the coal are for. Those white lines were to prevent people from stealing. Okay, so the porter told them that these white lines were to prevent people from stealing and to prevent the coal's amount of decreasing. Okay, so the children thought that the porter was extra friendly, he was super friendly, so they didn't believe him. They thought he was joking. So they went on their way to the railway station, they saw it, and they went back home. They didn't stay for a long time that day. When they went back home, we saw that the children's mother had started writing stories in order to earn money because she didn't have money to give to the children. And she spent most of the time of the day writing stories in her study. So the children were used to not seeing their mother much of the time anymore. They missed their father and they missed their mother. Although they missed her, she was always eager to provide the children with some quality and family time and to strengthen their bonds together. She would read them the stories she wrote at tea time. But when we have a closer look at the financial situation of the house, we learn that it was desperate. Mother really needed money. We see that through two situations. The first one was when Roberta asked to light fires or to light a fire because summer evenings were cold, but mother refused, saying that coal is expensive or coal was expensive and the family couldn't afford it. And the second situation was when Phyllis asked to put butter and jam on her sandwich, but her mother told her that she can have one of them but not both, either jam or butter but not both, because they couldn't afford it. The children felt the children felt bad for their mother, so they wanted to help her. As a way of helping, Peter thought of a clever plan. He invented a game called Coal Mines, and in his game, he would go to the piles of coal he saw earlier next to the railway lines, and he would take a pram and fill it with coal and bring it back home. He invited his sisters to play the game, and he made them promise not to tell their mother. The children went to the railway station or to the railway lines one night, taking a pram from the garden and filling it with coal. They did that twice, and for the third time, someone jumped from behind the train and caught them. The station master jumped from behind the train and called the children thieves. He thought they were stealing coal. And here I'd like to ask you a question. Do you think the children really intended to be stealing the coal? Or were they just trying to help their mother and give her the coal instead of asking her to give money? Okay, I'd like to hear your answers one day. And again, I'll repeat the question. Do you think Peter really intended to steal the coal? Or was he just trying to help his mother around the house? After the station master caught the children, he called them thieves and he wanted to take them to the police. The children started begging and telling the station master that they were poor and they didn't have enough money to buy coal or light fires and that they were cold. The station master was thoughtful and he let the children go with a warning, telling them to never steal again. The children thanked him very much and ran back home. That would be the end of our chapter, and now we're going to move on to the most important quotes. In page 12 of the chapter, we start with the most important quotes. Lines number 13 till you reach line number 15. Remember that you should highlight the quotes with me. This part shows how the children always had their father in the back of their minds and how much they missed him. It also shows how thoughtful they were not to talk about that in front of their mother, who was already devastated about father's absence. Next, in page 13, line number 18 until you reach the end of the page. So lines starting from 18 until you reach the end of the page. This shows how the children's lives changed from seeing their parents regularly to being used to their absence. It also shows how mother tried her best to earn money and give the children some quality time and fun too. In page 14, starting from line number 1 until line number 10, this conversation highlights the huge difference between the children's lifestyle in London and in the country. After being able to afford a maid and a cook, they couldn't even light fires or eat jam and butter. In page 14 and page 15, starting from line number 13 till the end of the page, and in page 15, starting from line number 1 until you reach line number 7, the game that Peter invented shows how thoughtful and smart he was, thinking of solutions for the money problems that their mother had. Sadly, his intelligence and cooperation turned against him when the station master thought she was a thief, or he was a thief, and he couldn't explain the situation properly. Peter was smart and reliable. He wanted to be the man they could count on in the absence of their father, and this shows the level of responsibility the children felt. And again, I will repeat my question. I'd like you to tell me if you think Peter was really stealing or only trying to help. Okay? In page 15, lines number 20 and 21. This shows how the children had needs, but they felt responsible and were independent and didn't want to ask their mother for more than what she was able to provide. In page 16, lines number 1 and 2, the children were so loving and cared about mother's feelings. They cared about their mother and her feelings more than they cared about themselves. When they were scared of going to the police, they were scared of making their mother angry, not scared of the police for themselves. And still in page 16, lines number 3, 4, 5, and 6, and this introduces us to a new character, the station master, that was so thoughtful, kind, and forgiving towards the children. We're done with the important quotes, and now we're going to move on to the summary of the chapter. The children started exploring the railway and watching the trains, thinking they looked like dragons. They wanted to know whether the train went to London, where they thought their father was. They decided to move along the railway tracks, where they saw piles of coal marked by white lines to prevent thieves from stealing. They met a porter whom they thought was friendly. They didn't stay at the station for a long time and went home. When we got a glimpse of what was happening at home, we learned that the children got used to the absence of their father and not seeing their mother a lot. She had started writing stories in order to earn money. If you remember, in the introduction, we said Edith Nesbit did the same. She started writing stories to earn money. But here, mother started writing stories because the children's father was absent. He wasn't there. But with Edith, she started writing because her husband was poor. Amazing. The children who had been used to a certain lifestyle asked to light a fire one summer evening. Their mother refused, saying that they couldn't afford it. They also wanted to eat jam and butter sandwiches, but their mothers also said they could afford one of them, but not both. Peter, who had started to notice how money was a big problem for the family, suggested the game to his sisters. He called the game Coal Mines and made his sisters promise not to tell their mother. 2 days later, Peter invited his sisters to play the game when it was dark. They took an old pram from the garden and pushed it along the railway tracks till he arrived at the coal pile they saw earlier. The children pretended that they were miners and started filling the pram with coal, then pushed it home. They were stealing the coal. They did this twice, but they were caught during the third time. Do you think Peter really believed he was stealing? The station master who caught them called them thieves and threatened to take Peter to the police. Roberta and Phyllis begged the station master not to call the police because that would devastate their mother and break their heart, or her heart. The station master was thoughtful and understanding and let the children go home with a warning and told them not to steal the coal ever again. The children thanked him and ran home. The last part of our video, the chapter in points. The chapter showed how dreadful the financial situation of the family had become. Still, their mother was persistent to provide whatever she could for the children. Although she was busy with writing, she was eager to stay with the children and read them stories at tea time. We could also see how responsible and passionate the children became. It wasn't only mother caring for the children, but the children also cared for her. Peter, who had felt the need to become a dependable man, invented a game called Coal Mines to take the coal from the railway, and this can be seen from 2 different angles. In both cases, he was just a young boy trying to be a hero or help his family. And now that we have arrived at the end of our video, thank you for listening and goodbye.